Now, Russia's war in Ukraine has proven almost every assumption wrong, with Europe now wondering what left is safe to assume. After a week since the mutiny, EU has now warned that Russia has become unstable and more dangerous. Following the brief mutiny by its Wagner mercenaries that exposed President Vladimir Putin as weaker than previously thought, which also sparked the largest political crisis in decades in the nuclear-armed country. Ahead of a gathering of the EU leaders in Brussels, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen had said aftershocks of the Wagner rebellion were still playing out. Meanwhile, another top diplomat of EU has warned that a weaker Putin is a greater danger. So they have to be very much aware of the consequences.
It's clear that Putin goes out of this crisis weakened, but a weaker Putin is a greater danger. So we have to be very much aware of the consequences.
And that's not it. Even Lithuania, which is an EU member, has raised its concerns with the presence of Wagner mercenary group chief Yevgeny Prigozhin in Belarus. The Baltic country's president has said that Lithuania is extremely concerned about developments in its neighbor, Belarus.
We are extremely concerned about the developments in Belarus. Prigozhin is already there. Probably I cannot say it by 100%, but this is very likely that he is already there. The fighter groups, or these serial killers, I call them like this, they could be and emerge in Belarus at any moment, and nobody knows when they could turn against us.
Now, the leader of the Baltic country, which neighbors both Belarus and Russia, will host next month's NATO summit, repeated his call for a strengthened eastern flank. And as the war in Ukraine intensified, the Wagner chief was told that his Wagner group would no longer fight in Ukraine, as he had refused to sign contracts to bring his mercenaries under the sway of the Russian Defense Ministry. Now, for more on this, we have with us Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis. He's a military expert and senior fellow for defense priorities. Welcome to the broadcast, sir.
Thanks for having me back.
Now, since the aborted mutiny, we have been seeing multiple addresses by the Russian president. But the scripts, they sound more or less the same. Vladimir Putin is trying to project a united front where he is in control. Now, the West is fearful that to prove this on the battleground, he might push harder than before. Do you think this is a justified concern?
It is a possibility. I don't discount that at all. But I'll say that I characterize what's happened so far as being a big embarrassment for Putin, and has opened him up to criticism among many, even his supporters, wondering why he failed to take action on this with Prigozhin, even going back to February of last year, and why it took Lukashenko to actually get the thing negotiated out here. So those are some valid criticisms, and it's not at all surprising to find out if Putin decides to want to firm up his grasp of power to make certain that nobody else tries a coup, that he may be a little bit more heavy-handed on some of his actions here. But he is constrained, especially on the battlefield, by the military capacity that the armed forces has already. So he can't, for example, launch some offensive all of a sudden if they're not prepared to do that, if they don't have the resources necessary. So I think that there's not a lot of risk in the near term that he would do anything that would have, especially any boomerang reflective responses on his country, unless he was very certain that he could gain an advantage by it.
Absolutely. That's a very interesting point to make. For a firmer grip, of course, you need your arsenal to back you up there. Now, the Wagner chief is in Belarus now, but this is a man, sir, who has been unfiltered for the past 15 long months of the war. He has openly targeted the Russian Defense Forces. So will an exile be the end of Yevgeny Prigozhin's chapter? What do you think?
No, I don't think so. I think that one of the reasons why Putin was so hesitant and reluctant to discipline Prigozhin going back to February and May of this year was because the Wagner group has been extraordinarily effective on the battlefield, more so than any other Russian military unit of its size. And so Putin wanted to keep that capacity without alienating the rest of his military. And of course, we know now he failed in that balance. But the fact that he didn't put Prigozhin in jail and didn't just completely disband the Wagner group indicates that he wants to keep them close, but not too close. So that's why he's put them in Belarus, so that there's distance between Moscow, so he can't make another move on that, but that he could train up, especially the Belarusian forces, and continue to expand within Belarus for potential use elsewhere later in the war. So Putin is still trying to find a balance.
So are you saying that we could see a re-entry of Wagner in the Ukraine conflict, or just on the training part?
Anything is possible because all options remain on the table for Putin. So yes, they could be brought back into engagement later, and that's the reason why I think Putin didn't disband them outright and allowed them to go to Belarus, because if he needs them, he wants to be able to re-equip them quickly, because they have combat experience that simply can't be exchanged or created anywhere else, because they have a very unique way of fighting. Yeah.
Absolutely. Wagner has proven itself. It was absolutely fundamental and elemental to the war in Ukraine. We saw that in big battles like Soledar and Bakhmut. And since you make that point, how do you see the recent developments changing the war in Ukraine?
There's no change at all, I don't think, because even after the Bakhmut battle on May 20th, the Wagner group had gone back to reconstitute itself and to rest up, and was in the rear areas of the Luhansk area, and was not even expected to come back into the line until sometime in August, after the summer offensive had taken place. So whatever Russia has planned in the summer is going to continue on without any change, I don't think.
All right, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis, thank you for getting us all those insights from Virginia. It's always a pleasure speaking to you.
Always a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.